And let's head right into the KUAM News Zoom room. We're standing by. We have the Executive Director of the Commission on Decolonization, Melvin Pat-Borja. Good morning, Mel.
Morning, half a day.
Let's just get right into it. So I know that we usually go out to New York City, United Nations, to testify a couple times a year, whether it be officials from the government like yourself or Lieutenant Governor Josh Tenorio, who you recently accompanied to the UN, or different activists or people representing the different task forces. So, being that we usually go a couple years, what kind of made things different for you and the Lieutenant Governor testifying this year?
One of the major components of our testimony and approach this year was to focus on the UN visiting mission, which is not necessarily different than what we've done traditionally. We've requested this in the past. However, a UN visiting mission to Guam has to be approved by the U.S. State Department, which has in the past been denied. There's actually only ever been one U.S. UN visiting mission to Guam, and that was in the 70s to witness the Constitutional Convention, which really didn't pan out exactly the way that anyone really would have hoped. But that said, this year there was a mention on the record of three separate UN special rapporteur filings claiming alleged violations of human rights in regards to the military buildup. And that was significant because it's the first time that the UN has really put out any kind of position or statement or advocacy for Guam on Guam's behalf. So those UN reports or filings from the special rapporteurs actually came out of UN Geneva, which is a little different than the UN headquarters in New York. And so what we had to do was transmit these filings to President Biden and also to the UN. And so having these filings on record in a lot of ways is a motivational force, a force multiplier for the federal government to approve a visiting mission to Guam. We know that this is significant because, as an unincorporated territory, we really have very little agency and limited participation in the federal system of government. But at the same time, on an international level, we are not members of the UN. So we exist in this very political gray area, and any kind of advocacy is very challenging and difficult for us. And so it really requires a very creative approach, a very consistent approach, especially on the UN level. The UN work is, very much a marathon and not a sprint. It's really all about how consistent you can be historically and what type of language you get put on the record. And the unfortunate reality of engagement at the UN level is that if you're not there, you don't exist. Even during COVID and during these challenging times to travel and to engage, the UN does not accept remote testimony or written testimony. It has to be delivered in person. And so, we're very fortunate that we were able to engage on this level. I'm definitely grateful that the administration has made a commitment to be present. They easily could have decided to just send me alone, but I think it definitely sends a strong message to the United Nations and the United States when we send our administrators out there. The LT did a fantastic job. He delivered a very powerful testimony, so much so that we were invited to meet with Ambassador Jeff DeLaurentis, who is the U.S. mission ambassador for the United States in the United Nations. This is all State Department engagement. It's very rare that the State Department engages the government of Guam. Normally, they like for us to only engage with the Department of the Interior, which has its limits, and it's definitely very problematic. Even with a high level of advocacy on the interior level, it's a very different treatment when you're dealing with the State Department. The State Department of the United States exists particularly for engagement with other countries, sovereign nations. And so, engaging us on that level is significant in the sense that, it does signal that, there is a higher level of consideration for our political status issues and resolution of them.
Mel, so I wasn't really clear on the rapporteur thing. So the State Department has to approve this rapporteur visit to Guam?
Okay, so what it is that in order to get a UN visiting mission to Guam, this is a mandate. So if a UN visiting mission is requested by a non-self-governing territory, the committee is mandated to respond. They're also mandated to respond for requests for support for education. However, those requests can only be fulfilled with the approval of our administrative power or the United States. And so even though we have asked in the past for both educational support and a visiting mission, without the approval of the United States federal government and the State Department, it's a no-go. And now the way that the special rapporteur filings factor into this is that this was actually not a Guam action. The special rapporteur filings were spearheaded by the group Protehi Latekden and Blue Ocean Law in collaboration with the UNPO, which is the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, of which we are a member. And so because we are members, now we have a stake in these claims. And so when these filings were assessed by there are three different special rapporteurs who assess different aspects of these human rights violations. What they did was they conducted, a kind of baseline investigation and then filed these complaints officially with the UN. Now, these all happened in Geneva, where the human rights mechanisms exist, which is a little different than what happens at the UN headquarters in New York. And so after they were filed, they were sent to the UN and sent to President Biden. And one of the things that we ensured was that the citation of these filings were noted on the record, and we're hopeful that it will survive the last vote by the fourth committee and be adopted in the resolution, this year's resolution on Guam. And so if that happens, which is very likely, having that claim on the record, it really just strengthens the argument for a need for this visiting mission. The idea really is that, the United States should be accountable. They should kind of have the opportunity to, assess these assertions and either refute or, allow them to come to light. So we're hopeful that the UN visiting mission is going to gain some traction given this additional action and these discoveries. If only for the pure sake that the federal government wants an opportunity to defend themselves. But we think it's important for the United Nations to come and assess for themselves. I think it's clear that there is a difference in perspective between the local government and the federal government, especially in regards to self-determination.
Right.
And one of the claims of these violations includes the lack of free, prior, and informed consent in regards to the military buildup and the impact that has on our self-determination and decolonization.
Mel, just for clarity for our listeners, are the UN visiting mission and the special rapporteurs, are those two separate things or one and the same?
Yes, they're separate. So every committee has a rapporteur, and the special rapporteur basically is built to take complaints or take any kind of assertion of violation, and they're built to assess those things given the scope of work of the committee. So even though these rapporteur filings are coming out of Geneva because of the impact that it has on the issue at hand in regards to the C-24 and the fourth committee, now it's kind of in their ballpark and it's on their radar. And so it's important for us to, we have to kind of do the extra legwork to ensure that these things are included on the record. So it began with us just transmitting the reports from the three different rapporteurs to both the UN, so the C-24 and the C-4, but also to the federal government and President Biden. Now, once those things go on the record, what we have to do is to strategically request, for the visiting mission and state the connection between these issues.
Right on.
And so, the only way to get that officially on the record and included and adopted in the resolution is to physically appear before the committee.
Well, it's way clearer. It's way clearer the third time you explain it. Thank you. I'm just like, well, if I'm having trouble following along, then I know our audience got to be like, hold on, let's just straighten this out.
I mean, it's a very complex and layered
Of course.
process. The UN is a bureaucracy just like any other, but it's an international bureaucracy. And so in a lot of ways, there are a lot of additional challenges. I mean, even just simply reading a testimony in front of the committee is not an easy task. There's a very strict time limit. They cut you off if you pass the limit. You have to kind of be at a reasonable pace so that the translators have a chance to interpret properly. You have to submit ahead of time so that they can be able to review them and prepare their translators. But there's also a lot of other engagement that goes on, while we're in New York at the UN. It's really important for us to engage members of the committee, to engage other members of the UN to get the support that we need. It's very different. Normally, when you're talking about a voting body, you're usually dealing with it as a voting member. And so just like in the legislature, when you want to pass a bill, you go out there and you work with your colleagues and say, hey, I'm going to support this. You support me, I'll support you. But we don't have a vote to leverage, just like we don't have a vote to leverage in Congress. And so that way it's very similar. We have to kind of get creative and find other ways to garner that type of support. And so in a lot of ways, it's like connecting the dots, trying to find a way that our issues with self-determination and decolonization are connected to other countries' issues and how they have vested interests. And so, for example, our neighbors in the Micronesian region have become significantly more important in the sense that now they are in a place where they are renegotiating their compacts of free association.
Right. Yeah, that makes me so malago when I see that.
Yeah, and so it's a very important opportunity for us because obviously the renegotiation of those compacts has a very direct impact on our lives here on Guam, given our connection to our neighboring islands. But it also does give us an opportunity to gain their support on a UN level, which has not been very easy in the past, And so I think that now more than ever, there's been a lot of attention on the geopolitical role of Guam and the importance and value of Guam, in the region in terms of, military and global conflict. And so, it's a very opportune time for Guam to be able to assert that, our self-determination, our decolonization has to be a priority because we really should have the right to have the agency in determining what role we play in the geopolitical landscape. I think it's very problematic when, Guam is used as a, piece on the chessboard, a very critical piece on that chessboard, but we don't have any say in, what role we are going to play or how we are going to fit into the scheme. As an unincorporated territory, the reality is that we're a possession and we're not a member of the union. We don't participate meaningfully in the system of government. Though we have a local government, we're ultimately under the plenary power of Congress. Congress can do with Guam what they will. And so, that's really what's at stake here is that, if we want to be active members and active players in our own destiny, then we must address our issues with self-determination.
Mel, I just want to kind of like everything you just said when you talked about now our geopolitical importance is highlighted in many ways more than it's ever been, right? And while you see that as a way for us to get a seat at the table and to have more negotiating power, one might also say that that's even more motivation for the administering power to continue to do nothing to address our political status or decolonization and just keep us, because it's very beneficial for them for them to keep us in this, like you called, the political gray area.
Right. It's absolutely beneficial for our administering power to have us remain an unincorporated territory. I mean, if anyone is familiar with, for example, the draft EIS statement or the EIS statement from the for the buildup, in the statement of need and the desire to relocate, these soldiers to Guam, one of the major arguments was that Guam, as an unincorporated territory, is recognized as sovereign U.S. soil. And because of our political status and our lack of agency in the federal system of government, it really does give the Department of Defense the flexibility and autonomy to execute their mission in the way that they see fit. And we see this a lot, right? Like there's been a lot of controversy around just the construction of military projects and the impact that it has on our cultural resources and cultural preservation. We have very little agency when it comes to the way that we engage the federal government in that regard. think the bottom line is that so long as we remain an unincorporated territory, our relationship with the federal government and with the military remains one that is based on consultation and not consent, which I think is very problematic, right? I mean, it's kind of like this idea that, like, you want to do something in someone's house and you just tell them, I'm going to do this. Yeah. You don't ask them if that's okay with them. And that's really what's at stake.
Or Mel, I mean, sometimes it's like they just start doing stuff and then we're like, hey, what are they doing over there? Oh, we've been doing this, man. We've been bulldozing your ancestors. You didn't get the memo, did you?
Pamphlet. Here's an and here's the information that you need to know. Right. And just to let you know, this is what we did, what we're gonna do, right, what we have done. I mean, it's very problematic in the sense that the only real obligation that the federal government has to the people of Guam is to consult us, to notify us, to let us, be aware of what is happening. And we have very little control to stop that. I mean, we saw that right when there was the potential destruction of the Nelsoni tree, right, on base during one of the major construction projects. And under, Rear Admiral Chatfield, the governor had requested a pause, right? She had asked for a pause so that we can assess the damage and come up with a better mitigation plan. And that request was just a flat no. Like, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. We're just going to continue on. We will mitigate the way that we see fit. And so, that's what's important about the special rapporteur filings is that they assert that there has really been no free, prior, and informed consent. And consent is the key word here, right? It's not free, prior, and informed consultation, which we get. But what we don't get is consent. We don't have the right to mutual consent. And this is something that I think a lot of our elders can really, relate to, in the sense that we went the distance on the Commonwealth Draft Act. And the major hangup for the Commonwealth Draft Act was free, prior, and informed consent, mutual consent, right? That was the piece of the Draft Act that the federal government was not happy with. They would have signed the Commonwealth Draft Act had we removed the clause on mutual consent and the one on immigration. But because we weren't willing to negotiate on that because the people had voted on it, in referendum, Governor Atta became famous, or infamous to some, as saying that, he's not authorized to negotiate on these terms because his people have spoken. I give a lot of respect to Governor Atta for taking that really bold stance. He continues to be criticized for that to this day. Yeah. A lot of people say, that, the government of Guam was just not willing to negotiate, or that we were not willing to participate in this process, and that was ultimately what killed the Commonwealth movement. But if you really read into the history of it, it was really about mutual consent. If we were willing to give up mutual consent, then we could have been a Commonwealth. But I mean, what's the point of us changing a status if we don't change our authority and our autonomy and our agency in the way that things happen here on our island?
Mel, you and I could just go on and on and on all day about this subject, but I wanted to just kind of bring us to the status of decolonization. Where are we with the education campaigns, and what is the next step in the decolonization movement as it stands today?
So on the educational front, we continue to produce content for the educational campaign. We actually just released our first 30-minute television special, which is being aired on PBS every Sunday and Monday at 7 p.m. It's also on YouTube. We've shared it on social media. We actually had a release at the Guam Museum recently. This is the first of 2 documentaries. The second documentary will be released shortly. That's going to be kind of an introduction to the self-determination study, which is finally through the last round of editing and is actually in the works of publication now. So we hope to have that study released within the next month or so. We're really just trying to get to the procurement to get it printed, but we will release it digitally ahead of the physical copies. Once we get the physical copies in hand, they'll be distributed widely to mayor's offices, senators' offices, public libraries, and the like. But it will also be available online. We will also be launching our comprehensive social media campaign. The study is a dense attempt at kind kind of assessing the different layers of this issue.
Yeah.
It's definitely an academic exercise. It's not necessarily accessible to a lot of people in the sense that it's a tough read. And so, we're very aware of that, but there's still a very real need for resources, for, something solid that's evidence-based. And so the study it remains important whether people read it or not. And so, but, obviously the information is critical and people need to know it. So how do we get that information to people if they're not going to read the study? One of the things that we've done in collaboration with PBS on this contract is to develop, I keep calling them the Cliffs Notes. I got to get a better name for it.
Just little bullet points and little pieces of key information.
Highlights.
I got you.
Yeah. So what we did is we broke down highlights from every section of the study, and we built them so that they can be delivered in really digestible portions on social media. And so you'll be able to kind of pick apart the study in pieces and understand it in sections, and then be able to reference back to the study for further reading and more exploration. This is all a part of our approach at trying to bring the information to the community. Once the study is released, then we'll start engaging publicly once hopefully restrictions are lifted soon, and we'll be able to engage on the village level in the community. I know folks have a lot of questions, and there's really no substitute for direct engagement.
Yeah.
So, we're hopeful that we can start these conversations again. Should restrictions not lift, or should there be an extension, then, we're just going to have to adjust to a virtual platform.
Yeah.
But, we've been really hard at work at developing this content and conducting all of the research necessary. In terms of the plebiscite and the vote itself, there are quite a number of options. The Ninth Circuit Court ruling will stand now that the Supreme Court has rejected our request for an appeal. And so what that means for us is that, whenever somebody doesn't get a favorable response from the judicial system, their last resort really is Congress, right? Because Congress has plenary power over Guam, they can literally do whatever they please as long as they have a vote. And so, it's a very real possibility that that Congress could just outright approve a vote for Guam on self-determination and authorize that vote to happen. And so, there's definitely been some exploration on that possibility and what it would take to achieve that goal. But another possibility is to draft a new local law that adheres to the parameters of the Ninth Circuit Court ruling. I think that the main issue here really is that we conduct a vote that is dignified and that treats our people, the colonized people of Guam, the people who have suffered this injustice, with the human dignity that they deserve. This is a long-standing issue for the people of Guam. We've been a colony of the United States for 123 years. We've experienced an uninterrupted period of colonization for nearly 500 years, dating back to the Spanish. And so, we remain one of the last 17 non-self-governing territories in the world. And so while so many countries and, former territories have decolonized and have found themselves in a place where they are fully self-governing, we have not. And that's something that I think a lot of people, even locally, are not very aware of. We see our local government, our government elections take place, and we assume that means that, we operate in a full system of democratic rule, which is true on some levels, but not true on others. Although we do have a democratic system of government locally, that system itself is ultimately subservient and at the mercy of Congress. The Constitution is clear, the territorial clause is clear that Congress has plenary power over Guam, and that Congress can do with Guam what they choose. And so, without a meaningful representation in Congress, we lack the type of agency that other states have. Yeah. And it's different because we're also an unincorporated territory. If we were an incorporated territory, that would mean that we are on a direct path to statehood. But it's pretty clear to me that, the United States never intended for us to be on a direct path for statehood. The unincorporated territory status is really just a colonial construct. It's built for a specific purpose. I think the purpose is clear, right? It allows the federal government to kind of treat Guam like a possession and do whatever it is that they please. And so, we're not over here saying that, we should have special consideration, or we should have more rights than others. All we're really asking for is dignified treatment that everyone in the world deserves. I mean, this is an unalienable human right. It's a fundamental human right.
Preaching to the choir, my friend. The way I look at it, it's like we're just stuck on this on ramp that ain't going nowhere, and we've been stuck here for hundreds of years. Like, Mel, it's always great to get with you. I want to get you back on. Maybe put on your DCA hat, and we'll talk about the things that you got planned for the museum. That'd be great.
Absolutely. I'd love to.
But Mel, always great to catch up with you, Charlie.
Absolutely. Sus Masi.
Algo más. Está.
Yeah.